Travis, nobody intends to get in trouble with the IRS. I certainly didn't.
Sure.
I had some unemployment and due to a layoff and a divorce and using of my 401k as part of the divorce to take care of expenses there. Never intended to fall behind on my taxes, but then once I did, and once it was a big number, fear set in, and fear tends to paralyze people, doesn't it?
Definitely. I'd say the great majority of people that come to see me have had some sort of a life event like you're describing. They also have sleepless nights is a big concern that folks have. The IRS is the most powerful collection company in the world, and they instill fear. That's one of their biggest weapons, I guess, so to speak. Let me just say, I mean, the tax code is complicated. It changes almost daily, and it's very difficult to keep up with these things. And there's plenty of people that get into trouble because of the complexity of the tax code in conjunction with these life events that happen to everyone.
Well, that paralysis caused by the fear has kept me from taking new action. I have taken action. I did an offer in compromise. It was rejected because I had some property in Indiana from decades ago that I didn't realize my name was still on. So by the time I got that cleared up, the offer in compromise was essentially dead. And now I find myself looking at, a deadline coming up. I mean, the IRS said you got to get this resolved, and they sent me a letter in June. Now we're looking at 3 months out. That's generally the grace period, isn't it, before they start taking action like garnishing wages and things?
That's right. Once they have alerted you to the fact that they're not going to accept an offer in compromise, for instance, they do give you a little bit of a grace period, but it goes right straight into normal collection procedures right after that.
How do most people find out that the IRS is proceeding with actions against them?
A lot of folks don't find out until the IRS starts taking money straight out of their bank account or out of their paycheck. Or if they go to try to sell a house, for instance, they find that there's a lien that's been placed by the IRS, which keeps them from doing that the way that they normally would.
So it's oftentimes a matter of you go to cash a check or use your bank card and discover your bank balance isn't what you thought it was, or that paycheck that you thought was going in never went in.
Absolutely. That's very common. They do have to give you some notice before that they take these types of actions, but a lot of folks are under the mindset, nothing really comes good in certified mail. They usually send you a couple of scary letters, and then they have to send you a certified mailing. They don't do a whole lot of due diligence on what type of address they send this to, and like I said, nobody really goes and picks these kinds of bad news up from the IRS.
Yeah, so I may have gotten warning, but it may have gone to a previous address and never came to me.
That's right.
Well, I'm here now, my friend. What can you do for me? Where do we start?
Absolutely. This is a bit of a process. The guarantees that I can make for you is that it will likely take less time to get it worked out than it took to get in it, which is good news. It starts with the filing of a power of attorney form 2848 with the IRS. That allows a tax professional to talk to the IRS exclusively, so you don't have to. The IRS will recognize that document within 24 to 48 hours, and from that point on, we're rolling with the IRS. At the same time, we file a Freedom of Information Act request to get your master transcripts from the IRS. That will give us quite a bit of information about the problem itself and give us a game plan for how to solve the problem. In that transcript, you will find the statutes of limitations, according to the IRS, of course. They're not always right. The penalties, the interest, and pretty much, like I said, the game plan of really what they're going to do next and what we need to do next.
as we go through this, and we're going to talk about what my options are and what my ultimate decision is, so that hopefully listeners can learn from my experience and the guidance that Travis has given me. But just in a typical case, what kinds of options are available to me?
Sure. Collection alternatives, as they call them with the IRS, include the Offer and Compromise program, which many people have heard of. It is just like it sounds. It's paying less than you owe, and the IRS will allow you to pay out your offer over the course of 5 to 24 months, and it gets rid of all the liabilities that are at issue at any given time. The installment agreement is also a powerful tool that keeps the IRS off of your back. Its downside is that the penalties and interest will still accrue against the taxpayer while you pay it out. But in return, you are essentially in a contract with the IRS for them to stay off your back while you pay out your liability.
Is it possible to get those installment payments down to a manageable number, or are you still looking at it, half of your paycheck going each time to the IRS?
Sure. It depends really upon how much you owe the IRS. They had been doing some public service announcements. They prefer the installment agreement for liabilities that are under $50,000. You can typically get those stretched out over the course of about 6 years in most cases. If you owe more than $50,000, it's a complex installment agreement, they call it, and those require some financial statements that need to be filled out by the taxpayer or their professional. Same concept, but a few more hoops to jump through.
So we have Offer and Compromise,
right?
Installment program,
right?
What else?
There are penalty abatements or forgiveness with the IRS. You can get the penalties taken off and the interest associated with those penalties. Interest is never forgiven with the IRS except for those ones that compound on top of the penalties. But if you have what's called reasonable cause, and that's a pretty ethereal thing with the IRS, then they will forgive those penalties. Reasonable cause is just about anything: divorce, health problems, losing your job, poor economy. It's really what we can get an examiner to believe on any given day is reasonable cause for failing to pay or file on time. There's also a pretty powerful program with the IRS called the Currently Not Collectible Status, or Status 53 as the IRS calls it. And what that is essentially is a hardship. It says to the IRS it's never going to get the liability that is owed, including penalties and interest, collected within the time that it has to collect that, which is, there's a statute of limitations that is generally 10 years. If a taxpayer can't keep the lights on, can't buy food and clothing, in other words, at the end of any given month, there's a zero or a negative after all allowable expenses have been taken out of the income, the IRS will place you in this currently not collectible status for typically at least 2 years, and as long possibly as the statute of limitations is on that liability. And you stay in that currently not collectible status unless something changes for the better for you financially.
Is bankruptcy an option?
It is for certain types of taxes. 1040 individual taxes are dischargeable in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. That is the only type of tax liability that could be taken care of through bankruptcy. And it's an option for folks who have liabilities that are at least 3 years old, and your tax return has actually been filed for at least 2 years and assessed 240 days. That's the formula for the bankruptcy. And yes, it can discharge or get rid of personal liabilities.
You mentioned the examiners.
Yes.
now that I'm working with you, do I have to sit down with an IRS official at any point and face them face to face?
In most cases, the vast majority of our clients never meet with the IRS again or speak to them. They will still receive letters from them as courtesy copies from the IRS, but we, with the power of attorney, speak to the IRS on your behalf, so you don't have to.
That's in and of itself is a relief, because it's intimidating, isn't it?
It is, and that again is one of their techniques in this process. And we also believe that having the power of attorney on file is a great value in taking that stress off of the taxpayer.
Why did you decide to do what you do? I mean, you could have been any kind of attorney. Why specialize in taxes like this?
And I was a different type of attorney up until about 6 years ago. I did primarily litigation things, and I think that has really contributed to being a good negotiator with the IRS. But I did some continuing education on this subject around about 6 years ago, and it really started taking over my entire practice. I realized pretty quick that this is a very needed and necessary area of the law because it affects, such a wide range of people. No one's really exempt from an IRS problem.
I attempted to go down this road with somebody who could help me a couple of years ago, and it was one of the largest. What do you call tax assistance firms? What do you call your business?
It's really tax resolution, tax dispute.
Well, this was one of the largest tax resolution companies out there, now out of business.
Right.
I paid $2,000 to these people. And the process seemed to go really well at the very beginning. We did all the paperwork. We had the initial consultations. The offer in compromise was made. But lo and behold, once that first part was over, the person I was working with was suddenly not available, had been moved to another office, and here's the people you should talk to, which I'm pretty sure was an outsourced phone bank somewhere. How is what Travis Watkins does different from one of those big tax resolution companies?
Absolutely, you're 100% right. There were a couple of very large companies that did this, that ran amok with several state attorney generals and had some class action lawsuits taken against them. Those are the folks that advertise very heavily on late night television when people are fretting about this stuff in the middle of the night. We provide a much different service than that group of people. We are attorneys and accountants that will take your case from start to finish and do it for a flat fee that is a one-time charge. There aren't additional coming back to the client and saying, well, X, Y, and Z happened, so you owe us more money, and we're going to need this before we can do that. Everything's understood up front in this process, and what we possess that even other CPAs and enrolled agents who are also able to practice in front of the IRS for these purposes is the ability to file a lawsuit. And that is something that's very powerful even in the negotiation process, because these revenue officers know that if things don't go the way that we want them to, they will be held accountable, possibly in a lawsuit.
I can't tell you how disheartening it was, because you get your hopes up and you develop this relationship with this one person who's taken your hand and said, okay, I'm going to lead you through this. And then you get the ball rolling, and then all of a sudden that person isn't there. So the fact that you have people that will see you through the start of the process all the way through to the end, that's valuable.
Absolutely. We're a small law office, really. in the big scheme of things. And you will use typically just one person in my office to go through every bit of the process. Those firms that you're talking about are usually high turnover or outsourced companies. I'm sitting right there in my office in Tulsa, ready to talk and look you in the eye and get some things done.
You have any other advice for me as we start this thing?
Absolutely. Like I said, the process is just that. It will take a little bit of time. We don't have a whole lot of time in this particular case because it is coming right out of that offer and compromise
appeal
process. Be sure and, of course, pay your taxes on time, file on time, during the process. The offer and compromise itself, which we're going to look at that possibility again, is a thing where if it's accepted, you have to file and pay on time for the next 5 years, or all that liability comes right back on top of you. So we have quite a bit of that preventative type of medicine at our office that we try to get people back on the right track so that this aberration in life doesn't happen again.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll take that prescription.
Very good.